I am very sorry not to be there in person. I really am. I am currently in Belfast in Northern Ireland, where I've just begun my new PhD. And I was thinking last night when I was putting these notes together, how in a way, although it's pretty disappointing that I'm not able to be there, this distance is also kind of interesting, and it demonstrates a bit of what our research has been kind of bringing up, which is this massive disconnection between the people doing research and some of the high-level discussions, which often happen remotely, and then the lived reality of the grassroots communities that you guys are obviously far more aware of. Our research, next slide please, Closing the Gap in Iraq's Legal Framework, argues that Iraq's accelerating climate crisis is experienced first and foremost as a crisis of justice, health and dignity and governance. It's not just the technical impact of climate change, and therefore we looked at the legal system itself as a fault in creating what we have called a recognition gap. So as you can see on the screen, thank you so much to everyone who helped with that. What is this gap? It's the failure of the law to even see and to name the harm that women experience. Without that legal recognition, there can be no remedy. There's a lot of thought, like academic thought at the moment, going into something which is called epistemic injustice. And this is basically the idea that we have to be able to name injustices to know that they are wrong. And there are so many examples that we could talk about forever, but like abuses in the past, for example, slavery, if it wasn't seen as a bad thing at the time under the law, it's ethically, morally took a lot longer to challenge. Obviously, that's not a perfect example, but as you can see again on the slides here, that's important also for Iraq's climate response. And I'm just going to check this is being recorded from my side. It is. Okay. First, we must, next slide, please, Ahang. We must, and we did acknowledge Iraq's formal climate commitments that exist currently. And on paper, the legal architecture does exist. You can see on the screen, hopefully also here, although I can't entirely see, but I think it looks okay. Some of Iraq's key domestic laws and international treaties, and hopefully you've also received these in the handouts that I sent over. So in terms of domestic laws, we have Article 33 of the 2005 Constitution, which apparently turned 20 years old yesterday. On paper, this guarantees every individual the right to a safe environment. Obviously, in reality, that is deeply questionable, but I think it's important to look at what is legally there. Then most importantly, the sort of in terms of climate protection, the 2009 Environmental Protection and Improvement Law, number 27, is the core instrument. One of the people we spoke to, MP Amanj Haki, confirmed that a new draft law is underway, but the 2009 law is still the existing tool. In terms of climate planning, Iraq has submitted its nationally determined contributions, NDCs, under the Paris Agreement, which it ratified in 2021, and various recent strategies. And if we could have the next slide, please. In terms of international commitments, Iraq has ratified the Paris Agreement. This is in 2021, I believe. It's a signatory to human rights treaties like CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and other sort of key treaties like the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which were ratified in the 70s under the former regime. These treaties, read alongside Article 33 of the Constitution, really should require action where environmental harm disproportionately affects women. And next slide, please. On paper, this architecture looks really comprehensive, but our legal mapping and what we set out in the report basically shows that these instruments are pretty neutral in terms of mentioning actual impact also on different parts of society, including women. So one of the lawyers we spoke to, Shokhan Samin, who Ahang interviewed, I put her quote on the screen here, and our research confirmed this too. The instruments focus on technical targeting like mitigation, water quotas, infrastructure projects, and they treat climate harm as a scientific thing, not an embedded social justice or injustice rather. And the result is, and I hope people can hear me. I'm sorry if this is this clear enough? Okay. In short, the result of this sort of thinking is that the law literally does not have any language to name the injustice that is happening to women. And I really hope that we have time, maybe after my talk, to actually go through some of those findings, because there's a lot of quite surprising things that our research uncovered, and implications that go far beyond just heat and water to, you know, to education and to marriage and to physical safety and kind of psychological abuse. Next slide, please. So in terms of the key findings, I'm going to break it down into three like specific things. So the first one on the previous slide is looking at the actual lack of mentioning the harm. This one is the fact that enforcement is blocked even where laws or provisions to expand the law does exist. So again, we spoke to lots of people, but in terms of this particular point, Dr. Zainab Shukar, who was our research mentor, she's written a lot about Iraq's rentier political economy, which is basically its relationship to the oil industry, and this as a reason to help explain why there is such a lack of kind of progress on climate change, like both prevention and addressing very clear and obvious harm. And that's essentially because where challenging oil revenue can threaten elite interests, non-enforcement happens as like a very logical response by people in power to protect their revenue streams, and as a kind of an incentive to politically bargain. And I'm sure everyone is aware of that. And, you know, obviously elections are coming up, and it's also a political issue. So in this context, just awareness or workshops or strategies alone won't really deliver change. Something really interesting Dr. Shukar added in an interview to me is that, and this is also in the report, that we know what direct pressure looks like on security in the context of US pressure on Iraq's Iranian proxies. And it might be worth asking questions as to why we don't see any similar interest, effort, or care on environmental issues. And I think it's a good point. There are levers of power that are not being used. A lawyer, Mohammed Al-Salani in Basra, who Sama interviewed, also highlighted the weak oversight of polluting companies, particularly in the oil and gas sector, who obviously also, you know, as you know, wield significant influence and escape accountability. And Ban Flair from the Prime Minister's office, who Yahya interviewed, really interestingly, also on the record, identified several key challenges, including, which we set out in the report, a weak institutional and oversight framework, administrative and financial corruption, political and security priorities that are prioritized over environmental issues. And then this is now my own analysis, but this is worsened by the lack of coordination between different government agencies, which leads to conflicting authorities and useless policies. And that's obviously a major problem. Third slide, or next slide, please. This is the third point. no access to remedy. So bringing it back to the law, and with international law in mind here, if a woman seeks justice in Iraq, the pathways are blocked. If a woman loses her farm to drought, or her child suffers a breathing respiratory illness from gas flaring, in Iraq, she basically has nowhere to go. And there are some reasons for this, obviously, lots of reasons for this, but to keep it sort of succinct for a PowerPoint, domestic courts are ill-equipped. People we spoke to kind of explained how judges often treat damage as natural disasters rather than legal infringements, like literally breaking law or obligation. Even where that law may exist, it's not seen in that way. International recourse is blocked. As one of the international legal experts, Professor Finn, I interviewed, emphasized, Iraq has ratified treaties like CEDAW, but not the optional protocols that would allow individuals in Iraq to bring complaints. And this creates a legal vacuum for accountability. And this is a key constraint for remedial access, meaning individuals have no legal avenue to seek recourse or file complaints with international bodies. And also, I'm really open to hear questions or comments on this, because I know that international law has a very poor reputation, and also I'm not saying it's the answer. What I'm sort of suggesting is that it's a whole kind of theory or framework that is just completely ignored in the Iraqi context, not just in Iraq, but outside as well. And I think, and there is a caveat on the slide, that the framing of law does matter. And this, doesn't necessarily mean that international law is useless. And I would probably say that as an international legal scholar, but its power is not. Sorry, I just got a message. Is everything okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'll speed it up. I am nearly at the end. Okay. Okay. Sorry. The framing of international law is also helpful, essentially, is my point here. And as Professor Thin told us, and it will be published as part of our LSE blog soon, international law is often about the framing before it becomes about the enforcement. In Iraq, the clearest path to women's justice is actually, in my opinion, through human rights law, by reading the rights to health, life, non-discrimination alongside the various environmental harms. And this is also what a recent ICJ, International Court of Justice advisory opinion on climate reparations supports. So the language of international law, I do think, and a lot of our research would point that way, can, and hopefully through you all and everyone in attendance here, support civil society as another tool to pressure elites and donors. And we also do need to be really aware of Dr. Shukir's warning, also in our interview, against any Western green framing that alienates officials and people, and rather advocate for using a survival framing that connects with lived reality. So climate is water, bills, and health, and essentially human security. Next slide, please. So very soon, as I hope the guys have explained, we will be handing over to you for your thoughts. So I just thought to pose some additional questions here to just get people thinking. The legal and political gap demands that we test the limits of our imagination. We stretch kind of maybe preconceptions or thoughts that we all have been, born and raised up with. And the purpose of this event is for our thinking and our research and our thoughts to be critiqued. So something I wanted to mention in this presentation is that our paper uses the 2021 Yazidi Survivors Law as a domestic precedent for conflict-related sexual violence and sensitive legal recognition. As people here in the room may know, I wonder if Hassan Jamil is there, because he should really be in this conversation because he knows a lot about the YSL. The YSL recognises sexual violence in conflict settings, mostly Yazidi female victims. So one of my sort of thoughts maybe for table A, which will be looking at the law and institutions, is whether the principle of recognition and reparation for harm established by the YSL, which itself was heavily influenced by international law and reparations frameworks, be maybe adapted into Iraqi environmental statutes and approaches. And if not, why not? Please don't hold back. Please share your thoughts. This will be off the record, and it's a really important chance to tell us whether this is pie in the sky thinking. You know, if it's not going to work, tell us why, and tell us what your thoughts are about that and what the solutions are or not. Next slide, please. Just 2 more slides and then I'll wrap up. Feasibility versus the rentier state. The core of Dr. Shikha's critique is that environmental protection threatens the political elite. Therefore, quick fixes don't work. The solutions can't come from the people in power. So my challenge to table B, which is looking at governance and participation, is a sort of a question like, if political will is the biggest obstacle, how can sort of just annexes or changes like that, hopefully, if the recommendations can also be presented, then that will be explained. Can that be enough? Or must we prioritize conditionalities and direct pressure from donors and international actors? And we would really love your view or your views on getting a sense of which pressure you think, whether internal in Iraq or external, is most helpful. And finally, table C, which will be looking at community resilience. Next slide, please. Next slide, which is tokenism, participation, and equality. Well, we would propose ensuring women's participation is actually meaningful by giving them vote-bearing seats on councils, but that doesn't mean just pushing women into broken systems. So one of the questions to table C on community resilience, which will be with our colleague Yahya, might be, do men have such clear accountability and complaint mechanisms either? Because we need to ensure that we're not asking women to join an already flawed system, but actually start looking to creating a better system that delivers justice for all. So finally, the conclusion, as I hit 20 minutes of my time. Next slide, please. What does a pragmatic, immediate reform package or solution look like? We don't know. I'm hoping Sama and Ahang will give an overview of some of our key recommendations, but essentially from my side, this comes down to framing climate harm as a matter of justice and recognition. And by framing climate harm in that way, the foundation is much stronger for reforms rather than short-term suggestions or reforms that ultimately don't change anything. So the purpose of today is to basically test our recommendations in that light against your expertise and thoughts. But before we do go into the roundtable, we will have to present our recommendations to you. Final slide, please. Your insights today are really essential. I really hope that this presentation has made some sense. I'm really sorry about the tech difficulties. I hope that people have access to the handouts and get a sense of where we're coming from with this thinking. We are basically really keen to ask everyone in this room as experts in Iraq, in the context, in your societies, for your thoughts on our thinking. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. And I really hope that you don't consider this a wasted morning, because I think some of this thinking does matter. And I'll just end with just a comment, which is just personally, I've been really kind of frustrated by a lot of the climate and environmental justice movements and thinking in other sort of societies that there's this sort of attitude that Iraq is so kind of far behind, or, you know, we can't even use certain words to describe women. Like, how can we even begin to bring these concepts here? But I also think there's kind of a responsibility maybe to start doing that. And yeah, and, you know, the law and legal systems don't really change until people demand that too. So I definitely don't think it's a hopeless cause. I think even thinking about these things and challenging long-standing thinking is part of the process. But I will hand over to my colleagues who are in the room and able to run this event far better. But I'd love to stay online, and thank you so much for your time. And I hope that has helped explain some of the project. Thank you very much.
In the interviews that we have conducted, that gathered around 26 interviewees for our research. She covered the northern side of Iraq, and she had an analysis and main outcomes from those interviews, as well as myself and my colleague Yahya, who gathered all our key findings from the north of Iraq to the south. I would leave the floor now to Ahang to go through our main key findings from those interviews.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. The method we collected the data basically is qualitative method. We interviewed people qualitatively, but for each question we have different types of findings. Today I won't be able to go through all the findings, but I will highlight the main findings of the research. One of them is it will come on the influence of this legal gap and environmental harm on women, which the finding says one of the main impacts of environmental issues is that women are losing their livelihood and economic. We have several samples on that we have families and the research on the stories that we covered, that we have families, we have women that lost their livelihood and lost their economical resilience because of the harm of environmental. Another findings, it says that it appears on the emotional stress. Most of the women, especially those who live in the rural areas, they face this emotional stress. They go experience depression, and their depression sometimes will go to a very severe stage because of the environmental harm. Another finding that said it's on the effect of the environmental harm on health of women, and it affects their health, especially we have the cases that they've experienced a premature birth. We have cases of miscarriage and infertility and critical health symptoms, and especially this appears in the rural areas. In the urban areas, the cases are because they do have access to some kind of medical care, but in the rural areas, the cases are very severe. Another impact is on GBV. Most of the people who we interviewed, they are agreed that there's a great relationship between the impact of the environmental harm and raise of GBV and early marriage. But I want to just raise one point. When it comes to the early marriage, we don't have, for example, one-hand data. The data are second-handed. The people we interviewed are not experienced but they witnessed the cases who experienced, especially in the urban areas, that they witness early marriage and family tensions, of course, and we have loss of legal documentations. We have stories inside the research that we interviewed that the women lost their legal documents. They have difficulties in accessing to legal documents because of the harm, because of losing resilience, because of the economical harm, which kind of affects them in the end, losing their access to legal documents. And we also have in this question, what's the relationship between the woman's role in community and extent of the impact, we realized that the main findings of this question was that there's a great role between the social role of women in society and also the impact of environmental harm, because women in Iraqi society considered to raise children, to take care of the householding, to manage the water, and in the rural areas to take care of the agriculture, be part of the process. So when climate change heats and environmental heats, so women in the very place, they will lose their resilience. And another findings comes with this question, which is how do women ask for help and when they face environmental harm? Most of the women depend on asking for like the family, especially the head of the family, which is supposed to be the man of the family. Then like they go to the head of the, for example, the neighborhood, head of the village. But what's very noticeable here is that they don't really depend on the legal system. And this is, we can go to the main point that because of the legal gap, because of the lack of awareness, so they don't really go to depend on the legal system. Mm-hmm. Another finding, and I just want to mention one more point in this question, that women in the refugee camps and especially in the refugee camps which we have, they suffer more from the problems on environmental harms. And for this question, what are the challenges they face while asking for help? Most of them face cultural barriers. Mm-hmm. For example, when we have a woman who wants to ask for help, they face cultural barriers because men's words most probably considered like primary or like more important than women. So the first barrier when women ask for help is the cultural barrier. Then we have the institutional barrier, and then we have the legal gap. And let's jump to another. What's the community's response? Most of the responses or highlight that the communities respond when women ask for help is very poor. Again, they consider that reason because women is asking for help and it's not kind of to be considered. So again, here we have this correlation of cultural barriers. That so the whole findings of this question is the community's response for like women when they ask for help is very poor. What are the community-based solutions that women depend on when they when they face environmental harm? This is very interesting, this question, because we came to conclusion that women in the rural areas, they are like better in performing in depending on community-based solutions. They started some solution which we clarified in the research in detail, but like in the urban areas, it's not really like that. But some of the women depend on the NGO support to seek this, like to kind of establish this community-based solution. For example, in the areas of Germian, we have some community-based solutions by Wadi Organization. In Duhok, we have some community-based solutions funded by EMA Organization and by Jinda Center for Recycling Center. We have it in the research. Mm-hmm. But we, like all in all, the women in the rural areas are better in performing than the women in urban areas when it comes to the community-based solutions. Understanding the legal framework of Iraqi, how it addresses environmental issues, we interviewed lawyers, legal experts, lawmakers to answer this question, this question, and we come to conclusion that we have laws, but the laws are like, as my friend Alannah in detail explained, that the laws are first of all designed to keep environment, not, for example, keep humans from the environmental harm. This is the first point. The second point is that they are they don't really depend on gender, or they don't have as a gender they don't really differentiate between man and women. To be very specific, they really created or designed to protect the environment. So basically, they don't differentiate between humans. So imagine how can they protect a woman and support women's resilience. For this question, does the current laws, policies, and regulations protect women from environmental harm? Most of the people we interviewed, they were agreed that no, that the answer is no. And they had different interpretations for this question, but most of them they were agreed that our current legal framework, policies, institutional policies, they don't really protect women. Does this current laws, policies, regulations differentiate between men and women? As I told you before, no. The answer is no for this question. What are the consequences of not addressing women on environmental laws? As we mentioned in the very beginning, and which is the objective of our research, that most of the women lose their resilience. This is one. The second one is women's participation in other sectors. For example, women's political participation, women's participation in economy, in other sectors, their livelihoods, their health, and their role in the family will be kind of weak and will be more weakened, and this puts their resilience in danger, and finally it puts society's resilience in danger. What are the challenges of implementation of current laws, environmental laws? Like most of the interviews were agreed that the challenge comes for the existing ones comes from the implementation, because we have different interpretations, we have political barriers, we have cultural barriers, and we also have institutional barriers. For example, for the areas of like KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government, most of the people were agreed that because of the lack of budget and terrible financial crisis that KRG is experiencing, so the implementation of current legal framework is very challenging. So when we were asking them what's the main challenge in KRG, most of them were answering that the challenge is, for example, there is no money. So even the ones the current legal framework cannot be covered or be implemented because we don't have money. Or whenever we go to government to ask for help, they say, well, we will try our best, but the fact that is we don't have money. How does this challenge affect women and their access to legal channels in their local communities? Of course, most of the findings of this question show that it challenges women because first of all, women, they don't go to courts, they don't depend on institutional institutes, they don't also depend on the governmental offices. And again, they don't go to courts, and when you have this gap existing and you don't go to courts, again, it will be really problematic. Okay, then we go to women's incorporated while developing does women's voices incorporated while developing the environmental laws, policies, and regulations in Iraq? If yes, how? If not, why? Most of them were agreed that there's a very, very limitation here because women in the Iraqi parliament, first of all, most of them, they don't represent themselves as a woman, they represent their political party. Even the independent ones, so they have a very, very limited voice. So, and initially we have this very limited number of women and they act like this. So their voices will be incorporated, and generally the whole system, because it's male dominant. So again, so imagine having these three pillars of the problem in the same, so how can women's voices will be incorporated? So most of them will agree that we have this problem, so we have a very, very weak and limited voice of women. Beyond the explicit environmental laws, do other legal areas, for example, property law, personal status law, create barriers or opportunities for women? The main findings is both laws do not create a challenge, but they also do not provide opportunities. That was very interesting. The recommendations, we have a different recommendations, but we kind of gathered up all the recommendations to four main recommendations, which allow me to go to the recommendations part. Or Sama, if you wanted, you can present it.
Yeah, of course. I can present the recommendations.
Okay.
Before we head into the recommendation, I just want to reflect of what has been mentioned by my colleague Ahang on the main findings and that we have concluded from our interviews. Our agenda or our topic here of this research has been also reflecting on a case study, on a successful case study that has been happening in the region, which is in Morocco. Why we chose Morocco? Because it is in the region, yet it is not out of, it is within the region of the Middle East, and we could take it as an example, taking that it shares the same geographical challenges and it is within the same orientation that we are currently living in. However, they have demonstrated a very successful story since 2008 up until now by showing a role of adaptation and mitigation that had worked with the climate agenda and also worked with the women empowerment. Why Morocco? Because Morocco's constitution basically focuses on women's role as a pillar matter of integrating economic integration, political prosperity, and everything. So women in Morocco is being considered as a pivotal role here that they have been working with since the beginning. Why can we reflect that on Iraq? As mentioned by Ahang, the key findings of our interviews showed that I'm not using the word gender as a word, but I'm using it as a topic between male and female. We don't understand where is the woman roles here and where is the man roles here in every spectrum that we are working with. So if I were to focus on Iraq, how can I integrate? I'm just gonna focus, I'm gonna zoom out of Iraq and zoom in Morocco. In Morocco, they have been demonstrated in their legal framework in the National Determined Contribution that they are committed to reduce, you know, the main topic of the National Determined Contribution is, one of the main pillars is the greenhouse gas reduction, the greenhouse gas emission reduction. So in their approach of reducing the greenhouse emissions, by the year of 2035, they are responsible or they are committed to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions 53%. This is the main goal. But can you see, do you know what they are working with in parallel? They are integrating around 50% among 60 stakeholders working on this agenda, women. Do we have that percentage in Iraq? We don't. Do we have women in Iraq? We do. Do we have efficient women, qualified women? Yes, we do. Are they in the role that they can conduct policies, that they can sketch policies, that they can work on the ground? We have few percentage of it, but do we have around 50% among 60 stakeholders responsible on the National Determined Contribution in Iraq? We don't know. It's going to be launched from the Iraqi government, but from what I'm seeing on the real ground, no, it does not. So how can we remedy that? How can we focus? How can we fix this problem? Or how can we focus on the main thing, that it is not a matter of women empowerment, it's a matter of women inclusion and women involvement. Are we involved? I work with the international institution. My colleagues here work with either governmental or international institutions. Are we responsible? Yes. Can we do something about it? Yes. Do we have a voice for it? Not yet. How can I have the voice for it now? I can sketch the policy. This is our main recommendation that we are working on. We can sketch the policy and we can have what's called, and again, I'm not using the word gender as gender, but this is the English terminology of it, a gender annex for all the environmental laws that will be drafted by the Iraqi government. And we can have women groups in all the committees that are being established that focuses on the environmental challenges and the climate agenda challenges. Why I'm speaking of, I'm differentiating here between the environment and the climate, because it is not the same. We think that the climate change in Iraq is the main pillar that is affecting the livelihood, but it is not. Why? Do you know why, if I may ask you now? Do you know why there's a big difference in Iraq between environmental challenges and climate challenges? Because our economy is rentile. We rely heavily on oil, and the environment is being affected by oil. It is not the climate agenda. What is the climate change in Iraq comparing to other countries? We are affecting 0.04% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the entire world. We are not affecting the climate change. We are being affected by it. So if I were to focus on that, we have air pollution problems, we have land degradation problems, we have water scarcity major problem. How can I fix that? As a woman, not as a Iraqi member here. I need to be integrated. I need to focus on the fact that I represent 50% of the Iraqi population and I can still do something about it. Not by empowering only women, but being part of the system or being part of the solution. This is how I'm looking at it. I believe everyone here on this round table with us think the exact same thing. I don't want to differentiate between male and female here. I'm just trying to analyze it by saying we are part of the solution. We need to be part of it. And yet, we are the most marginalized by it. We are the most affected by it, comparing to men. So this is the main contradiction that is happening. And if I were to focus on the main conclusions and recommendations of our research, it would be summarized by, I can integrate women group in the policy making committees. I can integrate climate or gender annex in our policy making, and I can focus on what the women can do to expedite mitigation and adaptation. And I also can leave the floor to our colleagues Ahang and Alannah to shadow, put the light on more recommendations that could be highlighted from a legal perspective and also from community perspective.
If you have a question or recommendation, we are open to take it. We can discuss it, especially on Alannah's part and on the findings part. And for the recommendations on the report, we already printed the summary of the report. You already have it. But if you have a question, we will be happy to take it.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, I think we didn't dig deeper into the grassroots of the research as this is our first session with you. Mm-hmm. Of course, you are the experts and you are the researchers. From my perspective as a person who was was born and raised in the environmental of Iraq, I would say that one of my strength point is that I'm connected to the local context of Iraq, which is the simplest pillar of the Iraqi people, which is farmers and people, and I worked with them before. I mean, when you mentioned the Yazidi law, I was part of GIZ when the Yazidi law was issued, and I was also a gender advisor there in the time being. My question is, this research, I still didn't understand how inclusive is this research when it comes to women. I mean, as a worker woman, we work in a city, we work in an urban areas, we work in a crowded city. Of course, we are affected in the environment, we are affected in the climate change. A lot of things are happening, the dust and everything, and the water pollution and the water degradation. Of course, now, I don't know, everyone here can see that the Tigris, when you cross the bridges, the Tigris is almost is almost a land. Which is something really affecting us. But I think the most affected people are the women farmers. And because we know that in the Iraqi context, women, the farmers or the rural areas, women are the ones that are responsible for most of the work there. Responsible for farming, responsible for water resources, responsible for the family. And I think everyone can here relate to this and know that women there are the one that's responsible for the household overall, and men play a role more of a societal role. Like when they dressed, they dressed well, they wear their uniform, they sit in men gathers and everything, but the true work are being on women's shoulder. So I really would love to understand more if this research targets more the women who are living in an urban areas like us, or women who are living in a more rural areas. And from my perspective, I think we need to focus more on the women in the rural areas when it comes to laws. And I think we should be more inclusive to them. we as a people, and here I'm going to be very honest and very transparent, we who worked within international organizations for a very long time, we kind of developed this this disconnect from the people who are the more effective. So when we give solutions, mostly the solutions are from our perspective, not from their perspective. And I've seen this a lot before with the UN and with the GIZ and everything. So I'm just trying here to really give recommendations and give solutions to the people who are truly needed. So I really would love to need more information, whether this research focuses more on which I'm not gonna say which type of women, because we are all women and we are all affected by the gender bias in the laws and in the regulations and in the policies. But from my side, I would love to participate in a research that gives solutions to the women that's more affected by GBV, gender-based violence. I think from my side, I think my duty as a person and as a woman that's worked before on women empowerment, worked before on gender empowerment and gender inequality, I think we need to, I would love to give solutions to those women and to every woman else, but I think we need to focus more on these women who are more affected with this. I'm sorry, I took too long to say everything, but this was from my perspective something I needed to understand and I also needed to highlight to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We said the leader who find the solution, not focus on the just what happened and wrong. So. Actually, about the research, I find that you have to go back forward for a step to push this procedure in the future. We have to focus on the children, on the culture, on the study. Maybe you have to go to the schools and talking with the children about what they know about the climate change and what they know about their rights about it. Maybe we have to motivate our government to input these concepts and these topics in the study program. So when they have the knowledge, after that we can make a whole generation can stand these rules and can manage it and can discuss it with the government. This gap, it's because, for example, many of studies and research focused on marriage of children marriage. But they don't go to the children at school and talk to them. Like girls, what you have the right, what you need to be empowerment women, what you can do like a woman in Iraq, what the government and the institution give you the rights. Because they focus on the children marriage and what happened to these girls, and not give them the weapon to defend this situation. When I give the knowledge, when I support the new generation, maybe it's take time. Maybe it's like you are go forward for your research, but it's very necessary to get this point when you are talking to the generation and you are talking to the women. They stand what you are saying. They stand what they need. They stand what they can have, like a citizen, like a Iraqi woman. And we can add something. I'm sorry if my English is
No, proceed.
It's weak.
It's excellent. It's excellent.
Please speak.
Exactly. انت يعني اختي راح تستاذنها تكلمي بالعربي وانا اترجم اذا تحبين.
Is English okay?
It's perfect.
So, I need to add some point.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
about the women. We have, if we can make work about the rules that dependent on marriage women. What they have from the government, like special needs, what they have about when they have children, when they have a salary, when they have a vacation for birth, on these things. When we depend women in this situation, we have a strong women that have this mentality and able to involve with this project.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for organizing this dialogue. Hi, Alannah. How are you doing? I wished you were here in person. Absolutely. I have a few comments for Sama and also Ahang and also Alannah. I would like to congratulate you for organizing this. It's very important to talk about this topic and connecting it with women's role. That's amazing. I would start with Ms. Sama for your talk. It was amazing. How enthusiastic are you? How you work on this? How qualified are you? But then we need to not miss many of the points here. Now, it's not about women's inclusion. It's how we are including women. Mm-hmm. It's in Iraq, you see it. It's not always efficiency that talks. Maybe if now Iraq decided to include women in the, let's say, drafting a strategy on climate, they would not be picking you. That will be another woman from another party, from another thing. We need to work on who are we picking. Now, we have seen many times that just to involve women, we have put unqualified ones. And now, I'm not saying there are none, but I'm saying the way we include women needs to be studied and improved.
You mean the quota?
Exactly. The quota, it's one part of it, but then it's not about women, it's about efficiency of picking women.
Yeah, of course.
That's one of the points.
Yeah.
Now, that was one of the points that I wanted to highlight. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to Alannah, I would like, we've worked together. I know how great you are, but I would like to point out that it was a bit harsh language in the research. We should not call it a failure. We should not call it. We can be positive about it. When it comes to including the aspects of Yazidi survivors law, we were involved in the passing the law since 2019. I would really not recommend including the aspects of reparations into the climate law. The reparations and compensations are one of the aspects that may have served Iraq well, but also harmed Iraq. It's temptative. The whole system of climate would go towards the compensation and all that. I would really want to keep away the compensation from this law for us to get the most out of it. That's one of the points. And then when it comes to Ms. Ahang, I would have one comment about we are trying to solve something. It doesn't have to always be women climate. It's human climate. Mm-hmm. What is the premise of the statement where the climate affects women? No, it affects men, it affects women, it affects children, it affects mankind, it affects humankind. Mm-hmm. You should not always have to think, you would have this subconscious idea that it's women. No, it's not women, it's human. Mm-hmm. Just concentrate on that, because if we wanted to include you in this, we are missing a lot of intellectual from women's side to this, but then you need to concentrate on not only women, men and women aside.
Yeah.
That's one of the points. Then the point that I know we have less of women in representing everything in our country. Just to point out, it's not a failure. It took, Alannah, hear this out. It took UK 90 years to go from one parliament, women in the parliament, to 120 out of 650. Now, Iraq is considered young in this level. We are on the right path. And with people like you, hopefully we can do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any more questions, please? Yeah.
I can try and respond to some of those if that's helpful, or we,
موجهة لك بدك تجاوبها. أكثر سؤال أنت يعني تتعلق عليه. زهراء الصدر.
Yeah, then we will have 10 minutes to the answer of the question, then we will go to the breakout sessions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the invitation for the session. I have just like one question. So you said you have interviewed 260 interviewees, but like the specification or where they are located or like the majority of them, like from where demographically?
علي صوتك إن أمكن حبيبتي.
Okay,
تمام تسمحين.
تمام.
No, يعني. Okay, for the audience.
Yeah, just raise your voice, that's all.
Okay, راح أعيد. So you said like in the interviews you have conducted 260 interviews, but like where?
26 interviews.
Yeah. Sorry?
26 interviews.
26.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Among 10 governorates, we've conducted 26 interviews.
Yes, but like إنه
maybe.
Yes, no, in order like for us like to know these governorates, because the needs of the people of the north different from the people of the south,
course,
and something this like we have seen. So like for me, like when I think about climate change, like because my focus and the things I'm exposed for goes like with the people of the south. So knowing like where it's mainly located, these interviews, the majority of them would help us like to like design something like or recommendation that are tailored for like each one, because something no size fits all. And also I agree with the point of men inclusion, and this is something we have like seen in our like community engagement or civic engagement work, that when like considering like the dynamic, talking about the people of the south who are like having their own tribes or their own like narrative on how society should go, we cannot just like bring a woman and make her like the leader of a district. Like in Kurdistan, we have seen examples of a woman like leading a whole district by itself, and that was surprising. يعني بس including men in that, we have seen it like in an experience before with some organization. It helps like people moving together and women taking role, but like in passive way, but their needs are being met without being very how do you say this, very present or like in a pedestal over there. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that if you guys can hear me?
Yeah, you can start responding to that, then we can like respond to others.
Yeah, so sorry. I didn't get the introduction, so I assumed it was mentioned, but research was conducted across 10 provinces: Baghdad, Basra, Dakar, Diwaniyah, Diyala, Dahuk, Erbil, Halabja, Nineveh, and Suleimania. So we tried to do a bit of an even split. Again, I'm so sorry if this was already repeated, but we spoke to mostly women in rural and urban areas, as well as specific like activists, lawyers, journalists, officials in these locations. And in the report, all of the different interviews we conducted are like set out a bit more clearly. So there are kind of interviews with people in the south, and that is kind of reflected. But I really get your point, the last comment and the first comment, that it's not like a specifically like geographically targeted report, and it is a bit more kind of general in the sense that we wanted to get feedback from like as wide a range as possible about the issues we were looking at, rather than sort of specific measured impacts. Although actually, and I think Ahang presented this in her part, but there was quite a lot of tangible kind of evidence from the interviews about different climate harms. And yeah, and that did include agricultural struggles. And maybe if I could then link to the first question, which is looking at actually the fact that women in the South, and particularly farmers, those who are working in, responsible for farming with water issues, and kind of having to manage a household, are the most worst affected. I would completely agree with that. And just, basically say that I guess our focus was trying to look at something different. And I also really get what you said about the disconnect between research and the lived reality. And I am not even in Baghdad, so I am part of this problem, like writing about it from over here. And that's, a problematic fact, which I accept. I guess, again, maybe this is completely indulgent of me, but I think there is a benefit in thinking about things differently. And maybe, this research, again, I don't know if it was said in the introduction, but it's part of the London School of Economics, Moja Iraq, funded by the British Council. And so the idea is our report will be published in English and Arabic, but it's more of like a policy. It's like 5,000 words, so it's also a report, but the idea is it's like a suggestion of young researchers in Iraq primarily thinking about these issues in a different creative way. So we're really not very funded. We don't have like GIZ's ability to do daily on the ground research in the South. So I guess that would be my response to that. But I completely appreciate your comment, and it's really useful because that will go into our final recommendations, which is that, even this thinking is really far removed from the reality. And that is in itself a problem. And then the second question, completely agree that explaining people's rights, whether that's to children about their rights in terms of marriage or child marriage, or whether that's climate change, is something that, it could be a good place to start. Again, the law is only like as strong as it is respected. And I know that there are far many other reasons why it's not, that the law, I don't know how to quite word it. There are many reasons why people don't stick to the law, respect the law, not least like members of, people in power. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not helpful to set out like morally and ethically people's rights. I think it can still help, perhaps. It's something that, I had a great professor last year in Islamic law, and he used to tell us that, the societies that can challenge authority figures or have a sense of, their human rights, do often strengthen those over time. It's just a very, very long and frustrating process, and of course frequently faces repression and violence. So it's a tricky thing to just tell you to do, obviously. I understand that. Hassan's points, I wrote a few notes on that, and I'd love to talk to you also about it separately. I obviously, I guess I was quite harsh on the government in my presentation, but I think that's also a position that maybe I can take, and I respect that others take different positions. the issue of women's inclusion, maybe, yeah, I guess Sama and Ahang could maybe respond to that also, but I agree with you on that. And on the issue of reparations and, you know, why are we not focused on men as well? Reparations are a really interesting like focus at the moment in international law and human rights law, and it's an area that has just like exponentially grown over the last not even like 10 years, well, maybe 15 to 10 years. 2005 there was this big new like UN reparations framework guidance thing, and since then we see it in almost every conflict.
For the question that was risen from Zainab on how women could be inclusive, like the women inclusion here, and whether we include the urban or the rural women, we're basically not highlighting that women, the women, of course, from the rural areas are completely different than the women from the urban areas. They are facing different, like basically being marginalized in a complete different context. I could look at a woman who's working in a governmental institution who's from the urban area, but she could be facing the same margin, like she could be facing same differentialities or same mistreatment as the women who are being in the rural areas. It could be a difference on the context that where she is located on or what role she's playing. I could focus on a woman who is in the marshes. She is the household leader and she is responsible on the agricultural or her farm management and everything because she has the power to do it. I'm not focusing on how powerless she is, rather than how can I reflect the image entirely on Iraq and how can I best address the challenge. The marshland challenges are completely different than the institutional challenges that we are having, and maybe I could address it best if I am from an urban side, but a woman from the rural side whom we have interviewed, she reflected that to us. We made sure that as like among the 26 interviews that we have done, we made sure to include all spectrum of women, so we tried our best to be as comprehensive as possible to bring the conclusion needed or the recommendation needed. But here comes also your role with us to accommodate our recommendation and also to complement it in a very constructive kind of way. I would leave the floor now to Ahang to respond to questions, and also to Yahya. Yeah.
Yahya, sorry, we took your right way. So sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of the questions answered by my friends, but I will focus on two questions.
No, but I just answered from my perspective. I'm sorry. I know. I thought we were going to go round. And there were still some questions not answered.
Yeah, I know, Alannah, again, but what's the problem? I think we don't have enough time because I only got 2 minutes, so I will focus on two questions.
But we can extend a bit. I mean, I'm struggling when we started late. I didn't mean to take the time. I'm so sorry. Please say everything you want to say.
Yeah, thank you. So the first question is, I will go to Hassan's question. Thank you so much, Hassan, for the question. I may not agree on some points that you mentioned, but you know, the point is why we focused on women and climate. Women in the very beginning of the story, women are from vulnerable groups in Iraq. You know, we as a woman are from vulnerable groups. So focusing on like whatever comes to this country, whatever happens to this country, regardless of the issue, regardless of the problem, regardless of the situation, we are part of the vulnerable groups who will be affected. So why women and climate? First reason is women are part of vulnerable groups, so they will be affected. The second one is, as I mentioned in the findings, it goes back to the social role of women, especially in urban areas. We as a woman inside of families, our role is, for example, to raise children, to manage water, to manage food, and to manage like most of the roles that go back to the related or connected to natural sources. So and in the rural areas, women are have a very good participation when it comes to agriculture. So, like, when climate change hits the place, so the women are first to respond and the first to be affected. So, this is the way I personally think of it. This is it. For Zahra's question, you mentioned that why we should kind of, this is why my understanding of the question, why we should focus on the gaps, not the women's needs. I think when you address the gaps, you can easily address the needs. For example, through the research, I know with all the limitations that we have for this research, now we understand that what are the gaps, what are women's needs. So when we address the when we address the gaps, so we can address the needs, then through the recommendations we can work on the needs. That's really interesting, that when you address the gaps, you realize what are the needs, then you can come up with a plan for the needs. And this is what we want the government, and NGOs, people to hear about it. And for the as Alannah and Sama mentioned, we tried our best with all the limitations we have in terms of budget, timing, people, and the project. We tried our best to have women in different parts in 10 governments. And but honestly, I'm totally agree, Zainab, that that we have limitations, honestly. But money always matters, team always matters, but it always matters, to be honest. And I will give the floor to Yahya. Yahya, if you want to, my apologies again. We
have dominated so far.
Sorry.
Where is the women's right here in this regard?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Maybe climate change effect on the men, not women. I want to answer about the question for Ms. Zahra Sadr. She mentioned to start the reforms. We should start from the schools, from the primary schools, and we should increase the awareness from the children. Because I'm working in the government, I'm working in the Prime Minister's office, Public Policy Department. The government has introduced a new curriculum for the primary school education that called Our Environment, بيئتنا. This curriculum is important to increase the awareness, start from the school, from the children, because the effect starts from the climate change effect reforms start from there, and this is an important point to reform. That is my answer for this question, to mention this point.
Thank you so much, Yahya, Ahang, of course, Alannah, for the very comprehensive feedback, and of course to you colleagues for your remarks and recommendations, and also some highlights that we might have skipped while we were doing the research. Different perspective always helps. And that's why we are in most need of you all, because different perspective help us to see what we have missed from what we have, what we could do best, and how can we address a more tangible solution rather than a theoretical solution that could work anywhere but not specifically in Iraq. I would just want to also to recap what we have discussed by one thing. Someone mentioned that if you are working on the women inclusion, why not the man inclusion? I just want to highlight one thing. We are in a country that is a very complicated in the landscape and in the demography and the ideology and everything in it that has affected how to best address a solution or how to best tackle a challenge. We are in a country that has been socialist since the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, and now we are moving from the socialism to the complete different economic integration and terminologies. This has also could reflect on how are we addressing the challenges, or how can I face or speak of the women empowerment or women inclusion as a highlight. This is I want just to highlight to bring a reflection on that, because Iraq is very it's not a complicated country. Once you get the landscape, you would immediately know how to best address it, and that's why we are all here in this setting, leveraging from your expertise, from your insights, and also from our research journey, that how can we best make a better Iraq. Thank you so much for this very insightful questions. We would like now to take some few minutes to break down this session into 3 tables so that we can have our own questions and debate or discussions with those 3 tables that would work on the governance topic, on the laws and regulations, and also on the women's inclusion when it comes to health sector and the social sector. Thank you so much. If you can just take a coffee break for a second, and then we will redistribute our tables. Thank you, Alannah. You can also have a coffee break as well to take some rest. Yeah. I will leave the floor now to Yahya to initiate the conclusion of Roundtable 2 of the governance. Thank you.
طبعا في جلستنا كان النقاش عن 5 أسئلة تتعلق بالحوكمة. السؤال الأول كان أين يعيق الاقتصاد السياسي في تطبيق القوانين البيئية؟ تركيز الزملاء كان في هذا الموضوع هو على مسألة الجنبة السياسية بتوزيع الثروات المائية. يعني المسألة أكبر من مشكلة القوانين في العراق، هي مشكلة الإطلاقات المائية من دول المنبع سواء من تركيا وإيران. السؤال الآخر كان أين تكون مشاركة النساء؟ هل هي مشاركة حقيقية أم مشاركة رمزية؟ الزملاء كان فريقين بأن تكون جودة ونوعية النساء الممثلات للمجتمع تكون عندهن جودة عالية، مو مثل ما جاي يصير حاليا بأنه بعض الممثلات جايات من خلفية حزبية وما يمثلن النساء بشكل حقيقي. ورأي آخر طرح بأنه ممكن يكون تمثيل النساء الكوتا مو فقط 25%، تكون 50%. أي فهذه يعني مجموعة من الآراء. لضيق الوقت تفضل ست سما.
شكرا جزيلا أستاذ يحيى. والآن I will leave the floor to Ahang to conclude what she had gathered from the inputs in roundtable briefing.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a very interesting roundtable for our group, and I'm pretty sure your roundtables went as well. We've discussed different topics related to community resilience, health, and livelihood, and thank you, and livelihood and GBV. What was very interesting that most of the women who participated in our roundtable, they verified our recommendations and the finding. That was very interesting. But I want to mention, for the sake of not taking a lot of time, 2 very, very clever point that they mentioned in the roundtable, which is the issue of environmental literacy by politicians. This is very, very critical issue. They were all agreed that this problem should be solved. And another point was the issue of being trendy. They were agreed that in order to solve environmental issues and decrease the effect of climate change, we need to politicize the issue. We need to make it something prior by politicians and also by people. And one more point to be mentioned, very interesting, is it will be great if we work in the down to bottom, like from the down to the top, down and bottom to the top on the issue in order to be solved effectively. So we discussed a lot of points, but for the sake of the time, I will give the floor to Sama Yas.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to echo what we have discussed and also echoing what has been mentioned by my colleagues here. In response to the question that for how weak or how strong our laws and institutions in Iraq when it comes to the response to the climate agenda and the women empowerment, we have strong laws. This is the conclusion. We have laws that has been stipulated since the beginning. We have a strong constitution in the government that focuses both male and female are considered one in front of the law and in front of justice. But we are lacking is the enforcement of those laws. How can I enforce those laws and how can I reflect it on the real ground? This is the main challenge, and the challenge comes from the mistrust between the institutions and the governmental institutions and the citizens and the Iraqi citizens basically in general. How can I build this kind of harmony and synergy between both this would be our key input in order to address women empowerment and climate justice. And thank you so much for all your insights that has been contributed to our research here. We believe that we are going to bring some impact, and the major impact here that now each and every one of us knows each and every one of you, and together we can make the change. Thank you so much.
Thank you.